Welcome back to another video. Today we'll be going over functions in Python. So this is probably the biggest thing I could teach you in Python. This is what you'll be using for the rest of these videos pretty much. Functions are the most important thing really in any coding language. So as a reminder, open up your idle, and if you're just joining us for the first time, go watch the first video in this playlist and I can show you exactly how to get what you're looking at right now to be able to type Python. So to start off, what is a function? So basically, it's a reusable line of code that you can keep calling to use again and again. So for example, my favorite function to always start off with is an average function. So if I want to take the average of two numbers, I know I have to add them all up. Of two numbers, I have to add them both up and then divide it by 2 because there's two numbers. So typically, without a function, you'd have to write it again and again and again and again and just keep writing over every single time you want to use it. But with functions, you only have to write it once, and then you can keep calling it and calling it and calling it with no issues at all. So let me show you the syntax for functions and how we can get them to work. So to start off, we have to write def. Simply, I'm pretty sure it just means define, but that's the syntax for Python. So def, and then the name of our function. So as a reminder from before, it can't be anything crazy. You can't use special characters. You can't just use numbers. It has to be a word, and then included, you could have some numbers in there. But typically, just keep it words. Keep it simple. So I'll call mine average. You'll notice that it turns blue. Next, we have our parentheses, and then a colon. There's the header, which they call it, of our function. So you notice with if statements as well, how we have this tab over. So this tab thing over means that we're writing inside of the function. So now everything that I write in this tab part is going inside of the function. Now obviously I can just hit backspace and then I'm out of it. But I'll go all the way back up to show you. So inside of these parentheses, so we know with average, I'll just do average of two numbers for the sake of simplicity. So but we know with average of two numbers, we need to actually have two numbers. So in this parentheses, we write what's called our parameters for the function, which are just stuff that you take with you inside of the function. So we know we need two numbers, so we have to take in two numbers with us. So I'm going to call them num1 and num2. You can call them absolutely anything you want. Just keep the rule of thumb from before. Just name them just like words or anything like that. And they have to be separated by a comma. For every single parameter that you have, has to be separated by a comma. So if I had a third one, I had to do a comma and then keep going. But I'm only doing two. Cool. So then again, our indent here, but I'll ignore this for now, and I'll show you guys how to call a function. So to call a function is to actually use the function. So in Python, to call a function, we retype the name. You have to type it exactly the same. If I even do a capital A, it won't work. It has to be bar for bar, say if you want to say it like that. And then we have our parentheses, and then we have our parameters. So you can have no parameters at all, but we have two of them, num1 and num2. So that means we need to put in two numbers. So I'm going to say 3 and 9 are going to be our numbers. So now with this call, 3 is assigned to num1, 9 is assigned to num2. And I could call it again. I'll say 10 and 100. So now 10 will be assigned to num1 and 100 to num2. But don't get this confused. This is not all happening at once. This function is going to do this one first and then do everything. And then it's going to do this one. So basically, instead of having to write all this again under here and then under here, we just gonna keep calling it, keep calling it. So let's actually write the function so I can kind of show you guys what I mean in a better way. So first thing we have to do is we got to add up both of our numbers. So we have to make a variable that is the sum, this one, and this one. So I'm gonna name a variable sum. I can't use sum. We'll say sum1. If you notice, sum turned purple. I think it's purple. So that means we can't use it. It's in Python's list of words that we're not allowed to use because they already have a special word use for it. So I'm going to say sum1 is equal to num1 plus num2. Bang. So now we have these two numbers added up. Whatever numbers that we put in, they're not going to be added up. Okay. Now I'm going to name a variable called out. So now with two numbers, then we're going to have to divide it by 2. So out is going to be the sum1, because that's the sum of these two numbers, divided by 2. And that's the average. Take all the numbers you have, divide it by the amount of numbers. And it's always going to be 2, because we only have 2 numbers that we're bringing in. And then let's just print out, just so you guys see it. That's it. So I'm going to run it. Perfect. So why wasn't it 6 and why not 55? Why 6.0? Why is it a float? If you remember from a few videos ago, this is float division. So it's going to give you a float value. And obviously if you don't want to see the float value, if you remember from, I think it was last video, 2 videos ago, if you import math and you floor it, it'll get you 6 and then 55. But I'm not too worried about that. You guys know what to do. But yeah. So instead of having to write all this out after like if I assign num1 and num2 to 3, whatever, instead of having to write this thing out 2 times or a bunch of other times, I can write it once and then I can call it. And every call is a brand new line of code. So like this call and all this has no correlation to this at all. Basically think of this being written twice, except you don't even have to write it twice. The computer does it for you. You write this once, and then you use it as many times as you want, and the computer will write this out a million more times for you. You don't have to. You already wrote it once. You did all the hard work. So yeah, you got your parameters that line up with your parameters, and then you have these. So anything that you do inside of these functions are not really callable outside. So like if once again, we're back, we're not in the indent, so we're outside of the function. If I try to print sum1, for example, it's not going to work. If anything that we make inside of these functions can only be used inside of that specific function. That's it. I can't call anything out. I can't use it outside of the function. So once I make something inside the function, it can only be used, printed, anything like that, only inside of the function, as you see by the error message. So let's take a function that just sees if something is greater than another thing. So we'll say def, remember, is our function call, and we'll say greater than 5, and then we have to take a num, and then our colon. So I can call these the same because they're 2 completely different functions, and they have absolutely no correlation to each other whatsoever. You're allowed to call other functions within other functions. That's a little bit more of an advanced topic that we're not even going to get to right now. But yeah, we'll say greater than 5. So from our last video, I'm going to be using an if statement. So if, and there you go. There's your syntax. And it's actually kind of cool. Because now you got a double indent. You have an indent from the function, then you have an indent from the if statement. So double. So we're going to say if our number that we're taking in, our num1, is greater, that's not the greater sign, is greater than 5, we're just going to have it print greater than 5. I sincerely can't type. And then if you remember, we're going to be using else. So remember, it goes right after our if statement and the stuff inside of it. If and else, 2 peas in a pod. Go right next to each other. If you want to use it, you don't have to use else. But for the sake of this function, we're going to need else. Print not greater than 5. Cool. So we'll test this out. Whoa. So greater than 5. So we're going to put in 10, and then I'm just going to copy and paste this because I'm going to write this out a few times. We're going to put in 4, and then we're going to put in 14. Sure. So we called it 3 times. 1, 2, 3. So as a reminder, to call a function, call the name, and then our one parameter and our one parameter. So this parameter is going to take in, for this first call, we're going to take in 10. So now num1 is equal to 10. And then our if statement, if num1 is greater than 5, print greater than 5. Cool. And then before, now this is a completely different call. There's no more correlation to this. You can just get rid of that in your head. Just like, gone. Now we're on 4. So we use greater than 5. Okay, greater than 5. And then we put in what? Oh, we put in 4. Okay. So if 4 is greater than 5, print greater than 5. But 4 isn't greater than 5. So this is false. So we're going to skip this. And then we have an else statement. So then it would go over here. Else, print not greater than 5. So then this one should print not greater than 5. Cool. So we'll run it. We'll see what it does. Perfect. Greater than 5, not greater than 5, greater than 5. Perfect. So typically in these we would use return statements, which I'll go over in the next video. But basically they're the better alternative to print statements because you can actually hold them in values. Or in variables, excuse me. Like you can say like a is equal to that, but that doesn't make sense because we don't have a return statement. And I don't want to stick too much in your guys' head for this video because I don't want this video to get too long. But I'll go over return statements in the next one. So, time for a little quiz. So we'll have write a function that we'll say multiplies two numbers. Okay, write a function that multiplies two numbers, and then have it print the product of the two numbers, and then name that function multi, and then call it twice. So you got a good list of instructions, but it's only one function. So write a function that multiplies two numbers, okay. Have it print the product of those two numbers. We have to name that function multi, and then you need to call it twice. So remember, calling it is like this. So cool. Pause the video, go ahead, write out that function, and I'll do it in about 10 seconds. Good luck. If you pause the video and did it, I bet you got it right. Let's do it and make sure. So you have def. Cool. So we need to call it multi. So def multi. So it's a function that multiplies two numbers. So we know that we're going to have to take in two numbers because we need to multiply two numbers. So num1 and num2. Cool. Colon. Now we're tabbed in. So this needs to multiply two numbers, and then we need to have it print those two numbers. Then we got to call it twice. Still got a list to go here. So we'll have a variable called out, and notice this variable is not the same or has absolutely nothing to do with that one because these are two completely different functions. Cool. So def, and then we have out is equal to num1 times num2. Perfect. And then we just need to print out. Cool. There's your first 3 lines right there. And then we got to call it twice. So I'm going to call it up here. Because why not? Maybe it works. Multi of, we'll say 5, comma 4. So 5 is assigned to there, 4 is assigned to here. And then multi, we'll say 10, comma 10. And let's run it and see what it does. And there you go. You'll notice that there's an error. What I forgot to mention was, and I was just reminded of it, was when calling a function, it has to come after you write the code for the function. So you got to put it here because Python runs procedurally, meaning it runs from 1 to 2 to 3 to like it runs all the way down. So if we call the function up here, it's looking for the function. So since we put it up here, it's looking for stuff that already happened, but it didn't already happen. So there's nothing in there. So you'll notice that it says not defined, even though we did define it, but we originally had the function call up there. So if we move it down, hopefully when we run it, it works. 5 and 4, 5 and 4, 10 and 10, and then 10 and 10. That'll be it for this video. I really hope that clicked for you guys. If not, make sure to join the Discord or leave a comment if you're confused. I'll be sure to respond as quick as I can. In the next video, we'll be going over return statements and functions, which is really the biggest thing you need to know for functions. Return statements are by far like the most important part of them. So yeah, make sure you guys subscribe and follow along with our series, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you.